Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to this week's edition of the Belonging series, which is Imperial as One's candid interview series where we explore the experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And this week we've got Tiffany Chiu, and Tiffany is a senior teaching fellow in the Educational Development Unit at Imperial College. And she's going to give us some insights into her fascinating study of belonging, but about herself as belonging. Tiffany, it's really good to have you, and we're so glad that you agreed to join us this afternoon. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about your background, about your early sense of belonging? What was it that gave you your early sense of belonging and identity?
Okay, thank you, Wei. And then just to say, thank you for having me here. So to respond to your questions, I suppose I have the strong sense of belonging from, I think most of the experiences are from my family and my siblings. So I have a twin sister, and then so who look exactly quite similar to me, and then in terms of the way we speak, and then our appearance and our height and weight, so all very similar. So I suppose, as you can imagine, from the early, the childhood, I have my sisters, and then we kind of did a lot of things together, and then we spoke the language which my parents didn't understand very well since then, and then they always commented like, two of you kind of spoke like an alien because they couldn't understand us. But I suppose because we are kind of identical twins, so right, we have lots of the thoughts, and then the way our interests and everything is look quite, I think everything does kind of look very similar. But I suspect we all develop into the different career path and personalities afterwards. But I suspect that, I think that kind of helped me to get really strong sense of belonging.
So I suppose not only is it about the sense of belonging, then it's also about your sense of identity. Having an identical twin kind of like changes the dynamics a bit in terms of, normally you just think about yourself, but then you've got somebody who looks exactly like you, but do they actually? So let me ask a kind of like follow-up question.
Sure.
Your interests growing up with your identical twin sister, right? How did that impact on your sense of who you were as an individual, as opposed to, I suspect many people would have almost always put the two of you together because there were two of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. It's a great question. And then now when I kind of think about it, I think there are kind of pro and cons in terms of, you have someone who look quite like you. So I suspect that probably, so I think when we were young, my parents and also the people around us tend to compare us quite a lot. And I think, as you can imagine, this is a bit inevitable because we attended the same school and the same class, and and I think people around us try to compare us, and then maybe also dress us quite similar since we were young. So I suspect at some point we do kind of, I had this conversation with my sister saying, sometimes we have this commentary saying, don't copy me, or don't imitate this and that. And and then as we kind of grew up, and then we developed very different interests, and at some point we just had these discussions saying, we are all kind of very independent self, so we really need to develop and follow what we think we want to do or we want to pursue in the future. So I suspect my parents also kind of made conscious decisions. So when we attended schools, they kind of separated us into different classes, so not in the same class. So I think that helps. And perhaps also the good thing is because of this, I kind of developed a quite strong sense of, the consciousness. Or so I have been stay quite alert and attentive to what I do, and really follow what my heart tells me to do. So rather than thinking about it, I want to be like my sister, or vice versa, she wants to be like me in terms of what I do. So so I suspect I'm quite lucky to have that conversation with my sister, and then we do have a quite kind of, we are critical about the situation. So
you reflect on it. Sounds to me like I know that the twin sisters, you had discussions. It sounds to me along the way it wasn't kind of like, I suppose there was some bickering, but you had discussions about it's okay for us to look the same but be different. It's okay for us to have totally different interests, and we can still and everything else can remain, not the same, but we can have our different identities, right? I remember, was there ever a time where because I always think about twins, and how identical are you in terms of, is it easy if your sister was to come to work, would we be able to say, that's Tiffany, what's your sister's name? Sorry, if you don't mind me asking.
Oh, no, Jemmy,
right? So would we be able to distinguish between you, or is...
Well, I think it's gonna be quite challenging. I mean, if from distance, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. And of course, if we haven't really got chance to, so if others haven't really got chance to interact with us and really understand our personalities, and then the way we behave, or the way we speak in certain situations, I think that will be quite challenging. But having said that, my parents never kind of have the difficulties distinguishing us. So I think so every time when I call home, or when my sister call home, and immediately when I say things, and then they will just call my name, so they never mistaken us.
So for them it's very clear that it's two different individuals. You might look very similar, but for them it's two very different individuals.
I suppose it's that interactions with people, because then the people get the sense of the way you speak, the way you behave things. So I think it take time. So I think all these kind of takes time for people to understand or to interact. With us, in order to kind of distinguish my sister and I.
So sorry, I'm just thinking about in schools then. So when you were at school, did you ever play pranks on people to kind of like, I always see the movies where you've got twins and like they'll swap places. It's funny, last week I had my nephew over, and we were watching Sister. And when you said about, I thought, well, did you ever do anything like that?
We did things like that. I think when we were in schools, we thought it's quite interesting to maybe see the other classes, and then so we kind of exchange the classes. So basically I just mentioned to her everything about what happened in that class, and all my friends and my teachers, and just equip her with anything that she needs to know to be able to fit into that situation. So, and then we did successfully. Nobody actually noticed anything different, but I mean, at the end, I think I think the teacher found out that we did this quite notice things. So so that my parents know about this. But I think from that point onwards, we didn't do anything about this, but we thought, I mean, I think I can't remember how old we were back then. Maybe I think 7, 8. I can't remember. But
okay,
it's quite interesting experience.
But your parents told you no more of that. No,
no more. They told us off, saying no more that.
That's good. So in terms of like, I know I'm just thinking, I keep going back to this idea of the sense of identity, sense of belonging. You said you have a different perspective or interests compared to your sister. So what do I know your interest is kind of like educational development, belonging. What's your sister's, and when did you kind of like diverge? When did you make that kind of conscious decision that this is what I enjoy doing? And your sister said, well, actually, I enjoy doing this.
So I suppose that is in the school,
Mhm,
and then so I'm from Taiwan, and then I
mhm,
think the educational system is that I think in school we get to choose the specific subjects that we are interested in, and then we need to decide which discipline we are going into. I mean, not very specific, but let's say the social sciences or the STEM disciplines, or the art and humanities. And I suppose I have always been interested in the language. So any kind of language,
mhm.
and also in terms of the way how language functions.
Right.
So in the specific discourse. So I suspect I'm quite just I think I'm passionate about that. And
Mhm.
then my sister, I think she has been highly influenced by my father, so who is a doctor. And then as you can imagine, from Chinese families, the parents always want to kind of give advice to their children in terms of what would be the best for them.
Yeah.
So because of my family, I think my sister has been influenced quite a lot
Mhm,
by my father. And then
mhm.
so she is very much into medicine, and that is where I think she's now doing the Chinese medicine. So yeah, and that is completely different from mine. And I remember when we get to pick that kind of disciplines. So my sister is very, I think she's kind of 100% sure what she wants to do, and I think so am I mean, back then. And but my father kind of had the different opinions, so he wants me to choose the medicine,
Yeah.
the kind of the STEM related discipline. And then so I think he kind of we had a form that we have to fill in,
Yeah.
and then he kind of just tick for me.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, and that night I couldn't sleep because I thought, oh God, I really don't, I wasn't interested in that at all. So I woke up in the middle of the night. So I took out that form from the envelope, and then I just changed myself. I just changed to whatever that. And then because my sister and I had this conversation, I said we don't always need to do something the same or together or to meet our parents' expectations. I think, yeah, I think we kind of take our parents' advice into consideration as we choose our profession or the vision. But I thought it's so important, I need to follow what my heart tells me.
Yeah.
So because it's my life, and then I will take responsibility for what I have chosen.
Yeah.
So I did that. So I changed it. And then so I didn't say hello to my father in the morning. I just rushed out of the place, and then I went to school. I submitted my form, and that is done. And then when I came back home, I told my father, actually I changed it because I wasn't interested in the things that you are interested in. So I suppose that's the times when we actually kind of, because of the curriculum, the classes we attended, and also our, the colleagues and peers that we have come across are all
Yeah.
different. So slowly, I think my sister and I we all have our own very independent pathways, I suppose.
Yeah. So that was a conscious decision that you made. That's and it's what I find interesting, and someone just commented on that, is in terms of taking advice from your father, but yet at the same time saying it's not what I want to do. And for someone so young to go against that, that's very courageous. Were you scared when you were doing it, or what was it that was driving you at that point?
Yeah, I suppose it's slightly, yeah, scared thing. I think it's quite a scary thing for me to do back
Mhm.
then. I mean, when I think about this now, but I suppose I kind of came across a lot of different work from the Western perspectives. So you know, there was a bookstore near the places where I lived earlier, and I suppose it's because my parents always just they kind of drop us in that bookstore for whole day, and when we are not in school, and they just say, you know, you can browse all the books. And I suppose a lot of independent thinking and the encouraging thing, or that independent thinking kind of came out of that, the books, the things that I came across. And then I just thought it is important to follow what I would like to do and see where it can take me to, rather than just follow other people's pathway. So I think I did that decision, and I understand my father wouldn't, you know, back then he wouldn't be happy about it, because he, you know, just from his perspectives, he thinks, you know, being a doctor, I think probably is the best, you know, option, because that is where he's coming from. So but I just follow my path, but I think now he's proud of me in terms of, you know, what I have achieved. So I think in some ways I also proved to him, you know, I follow my path, and I think that is what keeps me going and have this really good sense of belonging, because I suppose the sense of belonging also relates to the things you do. So if I haven't really found my passion or the places where I feel most comfortable with, then I probably wouldn't, I would just do things for the sake of doing it. But I wouldn't really engage, or I wouldn't get that sense of achievements from the things I do. And I think that sense of achievements and sense of self is quite important to develop, you know, as part of the identity development.
Okay. I I like that, because you've kind of like segued nicely into what it is that you do now, and I can hear the passion. It was, for me, it sounds almost like that challenge of deciding this is what I want to do, even though it's not necessarily what my parents would want me to do. That passion then has driven the course of your career in terms of what you're doing now. So can you just give us a bit of an insight into what you do now and how the two kind of like marry together?
Yeah, thank you, Wei. So I suppose one of the research projects that I am doing right now is called the CIDUS. I don't know whether you guys have heard about this. So CIDUS stands for supporting the identity development of underrepresented students. So we started these projects 2 years ago, and now we are in the phase of developing the pedagogical materials to support the students' identity development and trying to promote diversity and inclusion, and promote the success for students from underrepresented backgrounds at Imperial in particular. So I suppose that kind of my kind of earlier inspirations kind of led to these projects that I would like to do. And because I think especially Imperial is a really competitive environment, and based on a lot of the, you know, maybe it's anecdotal kind of conversation or the empirical evidence, students do feel, a lot of students have lots of pressures and feel anxious, and then they kind of constantly compare themselves to the other people, and sometimes it's lose themselves because other people do that, I want to do that. But slowly you will feel, what am I doing? I'm just doing the other people, you know, the things that other people do, but I have my own things that I want to pursue. But because of this competitive environment, it is really difficult for people not to think about others, not to consider others. But I think that external influence is quite powerful, and then I mean we can't ignore that. But it's that balance between, you know, I understand there are external pressures out there, but in terms of my inner voice, how can that balance between that? So now we are producing a lot of the positive messages, and then based on the first phase of the projects where we collected a lot of research data. So we spoke to 110 students from different underrepresented backgrounds, and then they self-identified as you know, underrepresented in one way or another, and then we spoke to them. We understand their lived experiences at Imperial. So now now we just, we tease out the key messages from that data set and then turn that into the pedagogical materials that we want to disseminate to students across the college. So we aim to finish that by the end of August. So hopefully that those materials can be used in time for the new coming
new cohort. So can I'm going to put my academic hat on. Could I kind of like, because I'm interested in the idea of belonging as well. So what were some of the take-home messages which the students were identifying as being critical for their own identity development and their own sense of belonging?
So one of the kind of key themes that we have identified is that we found many students, doesn't matter in which stage, they can have this imposter syndrome, feelings. So it's like the feeling of not good enough. Even they achieve good, but they worried they will be found out as a flawed, so I suppose is because of the environment and institutional culture. So students feel, they compete. Probably there are so many other high achieving students around. So I think that feeling is more or less kind of chipping, as they navigate the university journey. So what we are trying to do now is that we have a lot of the positive or empowering phrasing or messages that came from our interview data. So for example, we have the students saying, you belong here, and then they don't let anyone second doubt your place at Imperial, because a lot of the underrepresented students might think, I get admitted to Imperial because of my underrepresented backgrounds, because Imperial have this widening participation agenda, trying to ensure this, and also EDI issues as well. So students felt, probably they want Imperial, want me here, want me here because of this or that, because they are not married people like me. But the thing is, I think those students try really hard, and I think it's a huge achievement. So we want to empower students saying, don't doubt yourself, saying, whether you deserve to be here or not, because you are here. So just embrace all the, this diversity and appreciate the differences. So we have all those key messages in the bookmarks, and then now we are producing a handbook based on these research projects, and then we aim to disseminate it to all the students and really trying to encourage them to ask questions, not to be afraid of making mistakes, because that is how we learn. So all those, I think we all understand that, but when we are doing things, we forget. And then those kind of fear, anxieties, lack of confidence, those negative feelings will impact us at some point. But if the students can see those key messages and visually, so we try to normalize a lot of the things. So for example, asking for help is actually part of the important student characteristics. What it means to be university students, and part of being independent learners, asking for help is that process. So it's part of that identity development. So we try to normalize some of the things and to make it really transparent to students.
Can I ask another follow-up question then? Because a lot of what you've said, because it has been so student focused, which it should be, because it's their identity development. But on the converse side, what materials are you then developing for staff members who will be interacting with the students? Because they are impacting on the student sense of development and identity, etc. So are you also producing that as well?
So now we are in the phase of producing the materials for students, and then obviously in terms of how to use those materials. So we are thinking maybe we can have a very brief guide, or have the conversations with different, the lecturers, or the staff members across departments to see how that can be used in class to facilitate that kind of discussion as to what it means to be a student at Imperial. So we will produce a guide for staff in terms of how they can utilize those materials in a quite flexible way and quite contextualized way, to fit into their context.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that. Really am.
I will share. I will share when it's ready.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to ask another question, which is more then about the impact that having done a study like this, which is looking on the idea of identity and belonging, how has that impacted your identity and your belonging? Have you reflected on your time as a student or your time as an employee and thought to yourself, well, are there any resonances, if that makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great question. So I will say doing this research actually helped me quite a lot in terms of my sense of belonging to Imperial, because I think one thing is that I feel this is a really meaningful thing to do, because then we are trying to, I mean, ideally, we would like to change the culture at the Imperial, and especially enhance this, diversity and inclusion, and really support the student to see actually differences can be a really powerful strength. So people work together. You need to hear from different perspectives, and that's how we work. And I think that also quite resonant with the real life experiences, because in real life you are gonna come across many different the people from different backgrounds, and they might have very different views from you and how you work together. So I suppose we are trying to really make students think, they're whatever backgrounds they bring to the Imperial, it's gonna be a plus. And then we need to see that as a positive things, because then people appreciate and respect each other. So because I'm doing these things now, and I think then I feel like I'm doing something good, and then I can contribute back to Imperial. And I suppose that kind of also so I kind of position myself as part of the Imperial, and because I'm doing these things, I feel I can make certain impact to the community. So I think that strengthens my sense of belonging in that sense. And I mean, when I was doing this, so now we are working with the 3 student shapers to develop this. And I think I also mentioned to them, I wish I had this kind of materials when I was doing my university.
So tell me why you said that to them. What was the reason why, now having experienced and gone through, why is it now that you think, I wish I had that when I was a student? What was it about your student experience which you can relate to in the current crop of students?
Yeah, I suppose one thing. So I did my degrees in Taiwan, and that is quite I will say it's not as diverse as the student body at Imperial. So in terms of sense of belonging, it was never been an issue. It was never, so because when we are all very come from very similar backgrounds, you don't think too much, because you don't stand out in terms of within that cohort. But I suppose one thing that I wish I had this support is my disciplinary identity. So I think when students join the universities, they're probably thinking about their academic studies, their social life, but not many students will think so much about their so-called professional identity development, or they might think about that at maybe a bit later stage in their degree. So when I was doing my degrees, I thought, I mean, upon graduation, I didn't know what kind of the career path that I will go for. So that's why I just decided, I just continued to study. So I did my master, I did my PhD, and after that, I start to think about kind of my career. In terms of what I needed to do. So the one part of our handbook that we are producing right now is actually have some disciplinary identities, where we kind of all these kind of the kind of like ID card, but this is open for interpretations and open for the subject to change. But at least we would let students know, actually being so for example, being a physics student, what does that look like? So based on the former students' experience, and then so what kind of the features and what students usually do in their particular discipline. So we understand that when we do this kind of explicitly. Sometimes it gives people a bit more kind of, it provides certain limitation, right? Because you kind of think, students tend to look like this. But I think our intention is that we make that explicit, but we also understand, we also make it quite clear. All these things are open for negotiation. So some students might say, oh, I really don't want to do that. Then that is absolutely fine. But at least they are aware of some of the common things. So they have something to start off. So I suppose it's to provide a little bit guidance for students' disciplinary identity, the development, in their discipline.
That's brilliant. I've always got questions, but this one, I think there was a couple of things which you said, which was with regards to your sense of belonging. It's helped to enhance your sense of belonging at Imperial. And you also mentioned the fact that actually you did all of your educational kind of like training, your PhD in Taiwan. So what was it like for you with that transition from Taiwan to the UK? And how did that impact on your sense of belonging and your identity?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I haven't thought too much about that, but I suppose that transition for me, sometimes I feel is a bit vague.
Okay.
For me. So I suppose that transition is, I didn't really have that much thoughts around then. So I suppose it's my personality. I'm always quite open-minded, and then I like to try different things. So I after my degrees, I went to United States. So I did my master there. And then I kind of, it just opened my eyes in terms of the different cultures and the way the staff members interact with students academically or socially, and that was very different from what I experienced in Taiwan.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. But I suppose because I'm always kind of open for the different opportunities and experiences, so I didn't feel that much cultural shock.
Right.
I mean, there are differences, and I kind of acknowledge there are differences, but it didn't kind of get in my way too much. So I can still enjoy so I suppose the transition is quite smooth because of my personalities, and also I also made quite a few good friends, and then we speak about it. And so I suppose it's being where we have a supportive kind of small circles where we can be emotionally honest to each other, and I think that really helped. That really helped.
So it's having that open-mindedness, having that ability to, or having the support of some close friends who, as you said, you could have that emotional connection to, and that open-mindedness, or that's what helped you to. I think one of the things which really gets me is that the open-mindedness enabled you to challenge yourself, and you saw it. Am I right in saying that you would see every opportunity or every challenge as a potential opportunity? Am I right in saying that?
So just open to opportunities, right? Sometimes I felt so my experiences is that, and I think that this kind of occurred to me when after my PhDs, when I tried to find a job, or the place where I will be or become. Is that so after the PhD, and as you can imagine, as an international the persons, I think back then I think it was really challenging for me to find any kind of lectureship, so lecture positions and full time. So after the PhD, so I did it in at King's College London in the UK, and then after that I kind of did a lot of different jobs. And I probably at the times I had 5 different jobs here and there. So it's part-time. And sometimes I just couldn't feel the connections or relationship among them. But because the opportunities came, and then I just thought, you know, it is fine. I don't know where it gonna take me, because I have very clear ideas in terms of the kind of academic domain or academic discipline that I want to be in. You know, I want to go into, but it's very hard at that time. So I did lots of different jobs which seemed to be irrelevant to what I wanted to do back then. But I just thought, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it and see what it leads me. And now when I look back, all these different bits all connected.
Wow.
And all these kind of all help me to find where I am right now.
Yeah. So there, I like that concept of there was nothing, even though you couldn't see the relevance at the time. It's as time has gone on, the relevancy has become more apparent. So it's become clearer. I'm just conscious of time, and I'm just wondering if there's anyone in who would like to ask a question. Oh, it's like all right, Miss Dr. Sunday, I saw the question as I was saying, the question popped up. So Sunday, if you would like to ask your question, please. Right, let me see your. Right.
Maybe it's the internet.
His internet seems.
Right,
so let me ask the question. My question is, in your time doing all these different impactful jobs, have you experienced any direct discrimination from other members of staff? Oh, that's a big question, Sunday.
Big questions.
I didn't want to leave it. I didn't want to leave it the last minute. I didn't want to leave the last minute, so let me pop it in before. Tiffany, you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes. Yeah, it's better now. Could you repeat your questions? I didn't get to hear properly. So I suppose the question is in the chat, right?
Yeah. So the question was in all of the different jobs which you've had, the impactful jobs which you've had, have you experienced any direct discrimination from other members of staff, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, so I suppose I have been quite fortunate. The people I work with on a daily basis, and also the colleagues, I mean external colleagues, I think most of them are very supportive and friendly and quite receptive to new ideas. But unfortunately, I think there are probably one or two occasions where I feel, you know, people can have this dismissive behavior or kind of, you know, make me feel really uncomfortable. So it is, so I think I can now kind of think of just one instance where I kind of share, I want to try to support, and then I share my expertise and then the research I do, but it's just people in the meetings and kind of, you know, didn't appreciate the ideas, or just I think one of them, and now I can think of that experience, is that I think one of them kind of just walk out, and so I mean maybe that person has a meetings that, you know, they need to go, but I mean just thinking about that, I think it's quite really uncomfortable situation. I will say most of times I think I think the experiences has been quite good, and I always don't. I think one thing is because especially I think at Imperials, where, you know, in the meetings, and I do stand out a little bit because because of my appearance and because of my, you know, the underrepresentedness, but I tend not to think that too much, because I always think, you know, I'm here because I have some things that you want from me. So I think in terms of the way to help me to kind of going through all these different experiences, or in the meeting, you know, trying to communicate the certain ideas, is that I think the confidence is important. Your expertise, the confidence, and the professionalism. So I think those things get me quite far. I
like that. I like the way you summarize that. It's the expertise, the confidence that's helped you to get to where you are. So you've used those as your armory.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
You know, I'm here because I'm an expert at what I do. I'm confident that I'm good at what I do, and I'm not going to let anybody else say that I can't do this and that I shouldn't be in this space.
Yeah.
I think that comes back to if I'm just listening to your story and I'm just thinking about what you've said, and I think that comes back to that decision that little girl made when it was about your qualification to do what you wanted to do, or what that decision you had to make. Do I follow what my father wants me to do, or do I make my own conscious decision? And you chose at that point, I'm going to make my own conscious decision. You may have not spoken to your dad for a day or two because but it's that same courage which you've then taken into the rest of you, and that's beautiful. That's my personal opinion, if I've got that right.
Thank you, Wei.
Okay. I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions, but I was going to just ask one final question, right? And that question would be, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self about how they should approach the world going forward?
Very good question. So I suppose I will tell my kind of 16 or 18 year old self. I probably will say, you did a good job. You follow what your heart tells you, and I think that is always good, because then it's either good and bad. You just need to follow that path, because I think one of the beauty thing is that a lot of things we can only look back, right? But in terms of things for the futures, we can try our best to be utilize all the resources available to achieve what we would like to achieve. But one thing is that we cannot control. So there is lots of things probably out of our hands, in terms of you apply for a job, but of course you applied, then there's a chance that you will not get accepted. You need to continue looking for it. But I suppose is never give up. And then everything, so usually I think everything happens for a reason. So I apply for a lot of jobs, and then I kind of ends up at Imperial. And I think that is a lot of the experiences in the job interviews, and also the questions they ask. I tend to have quite detailed notes for all my experiences. And then I did quite a lot of reflective journal. So I kind of noted all the different experiences. And then when I kind of go through the other kind of job interview, for example, I look into those notes, and I think that helped a lot, because experiences is simply just experiences. And if we don't reflect on the experiences, it will never become a lesson or the tips for you. So you just let it go. Then okay, you can say I experienced that, but what did I get out of it? I mean, it doesn't matter whether it is successful or it's a positive or a negative experiences. Everything is experiences. So, and I tend to talk to myself, everything happens for a reason. So either good or bad. So if you are not not going to that stage, you haven't yet achieved that the things that you want to do, but eat well. So just continue doing, because at some point I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna give up. It's just too many, the difficulties, and then trying to work in countries where it's very different from where I am originally coming from. But I suppose it's that perseverance and the courage to really see, and open-minded to see, what might come, and when it comes, you just needs to be confident to face it and try your best, and don't worry too much about the outcome. So sometimes I just felt, so when I was doing my universities, I didn't really think too much about my academic performance, but I tried my best to do everything, and it just happened to be I was kind of all the results actually is the best that I can get. So I didn't think about that, but it comes and it follows after all the efforts. And
So
I value the process a bit more.
Yeah.
But of course, the result, if it's good, I think that is fantastic. And I think usually I get that sense of achievements when I fully engaged and enjoy that process myself. Yeah.
I like that. There's a couple of nuggets which I've taken from that. Value the process, right? And experiences are just experiences unless you reflect on them. That will make them into the lessons that you need. Brilliant. Tiffany, that's the
I hope that is useful for others to hear my story.
It's been fascinating. I really love that whole concept of that reflection, that idea of learning from what you have to reflect on what you've done in order to learn the lessons which you need to learn. And the confidence that you have displayed and you continue to display will continue to help you to develop and get your sense of identity, belonging, etc. So Tiffany, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on with us this afternoon. It's been fascinating hearing. So I'm going to just highlight what we've got on for next week and some other events. But Tiffany, once again, I want to just say another big thank you.
Thank you for having me, inviting me here.
No, it's been fantastic, really has. Okay, so for next week, we've got Ife Yakorfor Yarwood, who's a lecturer in sustainable development, and she'll be giving us her insights into that process and her experiences. Tomorrow evening, if you've got the time, then there's a Black Pack interview with Professor Gus John, who's been an educator and human rights campaigner for a good 50 years. And so his story is something which is really impactful as well. If you've got time this evening, I believe there's another conversation with the Reach Society, and they'll be looking at making a difference, individuals who are making a difference within the community. So again, another event which you might want to tune into. And then finally, if you've missed any of the conversations, or if you want to rewatch this one with Tiffany, then please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, and you'll be able to see some more of the videos or more of the discussions which we've had. I want to just wish you all a pleasant weekend. We're almost in the start of August, can you believe it? So it's almost holiday time. So thanks very much for being with us today, and I will see you again very shortly next week.
Okay, thank you, Wei. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.